I want to ask you a question to start this off. The question is, in the firehouse specifically, whether it's you or others, whether it's what you notice or what you practice. Hold on, I'm gonna mute somebody. Here we go. It's all right, Kim. Don't worry about it. You're driving. You stay safe. Focus on the road. All right. What do you spend more time talking about at the firehouse? What's going right or what's going wrong? What do your coworkers do? What do you do? What is it? Do you notice that maybe when you're on certain shifts, it might be easier to fall into one category or another? Maybe it's a certain couple of crew members. Maybe it's when a couple of crew members in particular get together, whether that's you or somebody else, right? These dynamics are very interesting, how we affect and influence one another. So when we're talking about the things that go right or go wrong, what could that be about? Well, what do firefighters like to bitch about? Administration, sometimes, yeah. Staffing. Hey, why can't we ever hire anybody? Why can't we ever hold on to anybody? Uh, the younger generation,
Good.
Gen Z firefighters, maybe. Maybe it's the older generation. Maybe some people say, nah, Dave says, no, never, never them. Nope. Maybe it's pay. Maybe it's call volume. Maybe it's your officer, your lieutenant, your captain. Maybe it's your crew. Maybe it's department politics, the public. A couple names might surface that everybody knows at that department. Now, here's the real important question. No matter what category it falls into, how much of that conversation actually changes anything? How much of that conversation actually changes anything? And that's kind of what leads into the story and into the topic today. The popular story, right? I'm sure this is probably not the first time you've heard this analogy, right? The story of the two wolves. I remember being told this when I was like 13, growing up in my martial arts school. So there's a story of the two wolves. Every day, these wolves, they live in this home, and every day they just go at it in the backyard. They are just fighting and fighting and fighting. They're just at war with each other. These animals, they cannot get along. And after some time, the son in the story asks the father, these wolves are always fighting. So, like, which one's going to win? Like, eventually, one of them's got to win, right? I mean, like, this can't go on forever. They're at war with it. One of them is going to win eventually. Which one do you think it's going to be? And the father responds, the one that gets fed the most, the one that you feed, is the one that will win. The two opposing forces that fight within us, right? The battle so often is not the circumstances that happen around us, but rather it's the battle within, right? Is it what's happening in the world, or is it my analysis of it? Is it my judgment of it? Is it my takeaway from it? One represents, when we're talking about these wolves, things like anger and resentment, envy, bitterness, ego, and fear. And there might be another that represents compassion, courage, gratitude, discipline, humility, and peace. Which one wins? The one that you feed. Whether we treat the story literally or simply like as a metaphor, there is a lesson in self-leadership principle underneath it as it pertains to the fire service. Where your attention goes, energy flows, is the saying. Your attention is what nourishes either one of these sides of yourself. And we all have the capacity to fall into feeding both. This isn't some constant. This isn't some thing. Hey, some days I might be feeding one over the other. Some days it's easier to feed one over the other. Sometimes that other one, you got to walk a little bit more of a distance to get to it so that you can feed it. Okay. See, every day, by virtue of these things, why do you think we go over wins every Monday? Which one are you trying to feed? Which of these things are you, which of these wolves are you trying to feed? Where are you putting your attention? So every day we get the opportunity to feed one. When you replay an insult from, let's say, a hypothetical situation from an officer or a crew member, or maybe you are the officer and somebody does something to slight you. We replay it over and over and over, and we let that resentment build. You're feeding something. When you sit around the kitchen table complaining about admin for 2 hours, you're feeding something. When you constantly compare yourself to someone else, you're feeding something. But so true is the opposite, right? Every time you train, when you don't feel like it, you're feeding discipline. Every time you pause and breathe instead of react, you feed emotional control. And every time you recognize something you're grateful for, you feed your perspective. You train your brain. You train the animal. And every time you forgive yourself and get back on track, you're feeding resilience. Do you know how many people fall off track and then are just have too much ego, pride, or shame to keep going? I feel ashamed. So much shame that I can't even take the first step out. The question isn't whether you're feeding one of the wolves, because you are. The question is, which one is getting more of the food? And so ask yourself, what have you been feeding recently? Not what do you want to be feeding? Not, I think if we had the opportunity, all sit down, right? It would be like, well, obviously I'm going to feed the one that's going to make me feel better. Man, that requires some awareness, right? And it's not including how the people around you can affect you if we're not aware of it. It's not, the question is not, which one do you want to feed? The question is, does your behavior show what you're actually feeding? And man, can the firehouse become an interesting feeding ground, huh? This is where the conversation gets interesting. You ever feel like firehouse culture can be incredibly contagious? Like good days and bad days, right? Contagious, spreads like a wildfire. All it takes, sometimes just one comment, all of a sudden the whole day, right? Or maybe it's just like, maybe if you notice this was used to say when I was on, you get a call like right at shift change where you probably are going to jump the trucks early for the crew coming off. Like it's right in that window, but it just screws up the start to the entire day. And you just feel like it's just catapulting out of control. And it's just like playing catch up the entire day. And everybody, you can feel it. You can feel it. Yeah. It just takes one person complaining and then another person joins in. Then somebody else brings up another problem. Then all of a sudden we're talking about the contract and the city and what bullshit it is. And then all of a sudden somebody's talking about, yeah, and like if we had a better contract, we'd probably get better people. And then so on and so forth, right? Snowball effect. We talk about this all the time. Momentum doesn't care, positive or negative, right? You kick that ball off the top of the hill, it starts building momentum. If it's negative momentum, man, I want to stop that thing at the top of the hill, don't I, before it picks up some speed and mass? But if I have positive momentum, I want to let that thing roll. I want to let that thing just go, pick it up. It doesn't matter. Momentum is impartial. But here's the thing, all of this, like complaining, bitterness, everything, and in reality, nothing changed. The department is exactly the same as it was 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, 2 days ago. But everyone's internal state has changed. And I don't know about you, I find this fascinating. Like, ask yourself seriously, how many times, like during shift change or whenever, you walk into the kitchen table on a perfectly, in a great mood, and then walked out pissed about something you weren't even thinking about beforehand? Does that ever happen to you? It's happened to me. That attention is being directed for you. And here's the thing. We need to understand a distinction because people say, I'm just a realist. I'm just real. I'm just realistic. Okay. Negativity isn't the same as honesty or realism. Those are two separate things. The distinction matters. We're not saying don't talk about problems, and we're not saying don't challenge leadership when it's called for. It's not saying don't acknowledge staffing shortages. It's not saying don't talk about cardiac disease, cancer, mental health, suicide, all of the things that are going on. That's not self-leadership. Denial is not the same, just the same way as negativity is not the same as honesty. Denial is not the same as positivity either. There's a massive difference. And it's in asking a question. This problem exists, but what can we do about it? That's a different conversation. It's a different perspective than just saying this is bullshit. Great. Okay, we have this issue. We have this staffing problem. We have this contract problem. We have this fill in the blank. How many problems are there? Too many to count. Okay. But what if it was about what we could do about it? The difference between this problem exists and what can we do about it, and everything sucks and there's nothing anybody can do. One is acknowledging reality and focusing on what you do control. The other is a rehearsal in helplessness. And I'll look around the room. Do any of us want to feel helpless? Do we strive to feel helpless? Oh, that's not the firefighter way. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to help people that feel that way. So why do we practice this state of rehearsing helplessness? And what if you thought about this kind of attitude as like, every time I do this, I'm rehearsing and reinforcing how helpless I feel, how helpless I am. Eventually, you reinforce those thoughts enough, you start to believe them. Self-leadership means learning the difference. And like, take staffing. You can acknowledge we're understaffed. Has anybody ever been understaffed at their department, especially in the last 20 years? Yeah, probably. Yeah, 2 hands up. Okay. We're understaffed. This is creating legitimate problems. Yep. We have mandatory overtime. Yep. That's reality. But then is it followed by a question? What can I influence? How do I prepare physically? How do I lead my crew? How do I advocate appropriately? How do I recover? How do I avoid allowing this issue to consume my entire identity? Those are productive questions. The problem isn't noticing what's wrong or what could be better. The problem is when noticing what's wrong becomes your primary way of interacting with the world. If the buck stops at this situation is horrible, screw this. Now listen, I'm not saying that those feelings aren't valid. You can feel however you want. But does it dictate your behavior? Does it dictate your mindset? Does it dictate the actions that you take? How you view the world? Now, I'm gonna tell you to do something. I'm gonna ask you, have you ever worked with a firefighter you maybe don't like? Say, hey, we're on maybe on your crew. It's like, oh, it'd be great. It's the brotherhood, sisterhood, right? Like everybody gets along all the time. Right? Hold on. I'm gonna quote Deepak Mahatra. He is a martial arts student. He's a university professor, wrote the book I Stole Your Cheese. Great guy. I have a personal relationship with him. I've known him for 20 years. He's quoted saying he teaches negotiation at Harvard. He said, to have conflict, you don't need right and wrong. You just need 2 people. Yeah. You think that applies? You ever gotten into an argument with somebody at the fire department and you were both right? Or you were both wrong? It's possible. You don't need right and wrong. You need 2 people for conflict. And the fire service puts people together in close quarters for long durations of time. So yeah, this is going to happen. But I'll challenge you right now. Think about that person you don't like. Think about it for a second. Say, man, I just don't get along with this person. I don't like their outlook. I don't like, okay, whatever. Maybe it's the chief. Maybe it's somebody on your crew. Maybe it's an officer.
from years ago, and then ask a different question. How many hours have you spent thinking about them, talking about them, replaying what they did, an argument you had, a disagreement you couldn't seem to align on? Imagining, you ever do this? Imagining like days of what you should have said. I should have said this. Oh, that would have been such a good comeback. Oh man. In fact, next time I'm going to be ready. Ready for that situation that never happens. Ready for the conversation that's never going to replay the exact same way. Now ask yourself a harder question. How much time do you think they've been thinking about you? Maybe it's a lot, but maybe it's not. But no matter what the answer is, it doesn't matter because it's not living in here. That's their thing. That's their thing to deal with. Sometimes we're carrying someone around in our head who has completely moved on with their life. You ever felt that too? Somebody ever bring up a conversation that you had with them from like years ago? They're like, this conversation always sat with me. Or you remember when you said this? And you're like, I don't even remember what you're talking about. And they've been sitting there, or likewise, reverse. You're like, you said this 2 years ago, I'll never forget. And they're like, huh? I don't even know what you're talking. I can't even remember that. What are you talking about? That's not even a firefighter thing. A human being disagreement thing. Okay. Sometimes we're carrying someone around in our head who has completely moved on with our lives. And you're feeding the wolf. And they're not even in the room. Who or what is getting more of your mental energy than they deserve? Now, here's the thing. Just like we have the laws of reclaim in the martial arts school I grew up with, we have the 7.5 ways to become a great martial artist. One of them is practice exactly what you want to perform. Not exactly. Practice exactly what you want to perform. We think, okay, mine probably goes straight to the fire ground. I'm going to rep this I'm going to rep it like this. The training, the protocols, the procedures. Yes. And all of that is true, but we're thinking about it in a different context. I think we understand this physically. What you practice becomes your default. And if you practice repeatedly throwing ladders, you're going to be eventually good at throwing ladders. If you practice repeatedly hose advancement, eventually you don't have to think about it anymore. If you repeatedly practice medical assessment, your brain recognizes the patterns faster. Looking around the room, most of the people in here have a large amount of experience underneath them. There's probably things that you struggled with in your first year that you don't even have to think twice about now, isn't there? It's not even something that even crosses my mind. It's so automatic. And yet, the mental patterns, the mental habits that we practice, they work in a similar fashion. When you practice outrage, outrage becomes easier. When you practice complaining, complaining becomes easier. When you practice gratitude, gratitude becomes easier. And when you practice responding calmly, calm becomes easier. Here's the thing, training your brain and you're training your nervous system. I don't struggle to use this word, but like, it's true. It is. I just think it's been really overused in the last like 10 years, but like they talk about triggers. Like, this is triggering me, right? You see that all the time, everywhere. This is a trigger. This is a trigger. There is a truth in the sense if we boil it down to its key components, which is that when you refer to a trigger in its like most fundamental sense, it means it is a situation, a state of mind that gets triggered by the environment that causes a physiological change in your nervous system. The release of adrenaline. For example, this is a great example. Dead of the night, 3 a.m. Tones drop. Does your body have a physiological response? It doesn't matter how long you've been on. You don't wake up calmly to loud tones and lights. Your nervous system especially after repeated exposure. And I saw this with the data I tracked. I tracked my health data with a wearable for 2 years on a Whoop during calls in the middle of the night. You know what happened? Every single time, it didn't get better. It got more intense. Even when I was getting in better shape, even when I could look at this data and tell you every single moment that we had a call throughout the night. Oh, we had a call at 3:03. We had a call at 4:15. We had a call at 7. Spike in my heart rate. Spike in my heart rate. It would jump from 45 to 106 in 5 seconds. That is a trigger to your nervous system. Now, what are the tones that are dropping in your own life without you even realizing it? What's causing a physiological response to your nervous system that you're not even aware of? And this connects it directly with the idea that mental fitness should be trained. We call it mental fitness because you can train it. We don't expect someone to become physically strong because they understand a lecture about strength. And I've told each and every one of you, I don't care about you watching the videos that I do, although thank you. I care more about you practicing and doing and implementing way more than I care about you showing up and watching it. It doesn't matter if you understand it. It matters if you practice it. You have to practice. And the same goes for patience, gratitude, self-awareness, discipline, forgiveness, any kind of emotional regulation. And here's the thing, like we treat them like they're personality traits that people have or they don't. Period, the end. This person is a calm person. That's just how they've always been. I think there might be something to say that everybody starts with a different baseline, but that doesn't mean that you can't raise it or you can't lower it from that baseline. What is this? The whole argument, right? Nature versus nurture. Some people might be a little bit more docile. Some people might be a little bit more aggressive. Some people might be a little bit naturally more angry. Some people might fill in the blank. But is your state static or is it something that you can practice? And of course, we have to talk about the environment, right? I've shared this expression with you, and the one that I resisted for a long time out of ego and pride, but environment is stronger than will. When I first heard that, I was like, not mine, not my will. I'm the exception. How many times have you thought that? Like literally, no, I'm an exception to this rule. Environment is sneaky. You know what they say? Like there's a reason there's that saying, like, show me your 5 closest friends and I'll tell you who you are. Right? We're social creatures. We absorb like sponges, the attitudes, the mentalities of those around us. And self-leadership isn't just controlling your thoughts. It means recognizing what repeatedly influences them. So what would you say if you looked at your environment? Who do you spend time around? What kind of social media do you consume? That one's interesting. What conversations dominate the firehouse? What podcasts do you listen into? What group chats are you in? What news do you consume? If you spend 4 hours a day, you want to know a scary stat, go look at your screen time. and then go and actually diagnose where is most of that screen time being spent. That every one of us in here, myself included, would probably be in for a rude awakening. You spend 4 hours every day consuming outrage, comparison, fear, and conflict. It shouldn't surprise you when your mind produces outrage, comparison, fear, and conflict because input matters, repetition matters. Another lesson from the dojo, your diet is not just what you eat. It's what you consume. Your diet is not just what you eat, it is what you consume. What are you consuming mentally? What are you consuming every day that is making you a worse version of yourself? And what could you consume more of that would help you to be better? And I think there's an obvious fire service application here. And I would say this very much. This is my personal experience. And I became like, can we be honest? Like, let's put aside everything else. Like, I've been through stages. Every single one of us has probably been through stages in the fire service where we became maybe a lot more cynical and outraged than we wanted to be. But did any of us enter the fire service like that? Like on your first day, did you come in just like mad and cynical and jaded? I don't think anybody starts that way. Most firefighters don't enter the profession cynical. You think about maybe you have a probie right now, maybe you have more than one. How do they normally start, right? A good one, at least, right? Excited, proud, want to train, want to learn, clean without being asked. They put in the effort, they show the initiative, love coming in. And then 10 years go by. 10 years of repetition. Now everything sucks. Admin sucks, the public sucks, training sucks, new firefighters suck, the department sucks. What happened? What happened? Some of it might be legitimate experience. You've seen problems. They've been disappointed. They've been burned. But sometimes, maybe they're also spending 10 years feeding cynicism. And every negative event that happens becomes evidence that they were right. To the point where every positive event gets ignored, gets thrown out as a fluke, as a maybe, as a this never happens anyways. And what are we doing? We're building momentum in a certain direction until over time it becomes natural, until over time you don't have to think about being that way. Becomes like the muscle, the skill. These things are skills. That's why when you try to be the opposite, it feels unnatural. Not because that's who you are, but because you're so used to being the other way. To the point where eventually cynicism feels like wisdom. Feels like realism. But it isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it's just simply a practice perspective that we gain over time. And so I would ask of you to watch the story that you're creating, because our brains are constantly collecting evidence for whatever story we already believe. Ever seen this? Haven't disagree. We all love to act like we like are just the most distinguished, practiced like researchers on the planet. And we ever notice as you see this, all of a sudden everybody's sending PM IDs, research numbers for this thing, that thing, the other. You know how easy it is to find anything that agrees with your preconceived notions? It's pretty easy, right? You can find something somewhere. And usually there's a lot more nuance in research, and I'm not going to make this conversation about that. But the point is, how primed are we to believe the things that we already want to believe? And here's the other thing. I heard this statement online in the last few weeks. The people who are best at selling stories are the ones who want to believe them the most. The people who are best at selling stories are the ones that want to believe them the most. So if you believe this, for example, this department sucks and they don't care about us, you'll notice everything that confirms it. And if you believe, here's a great example. You ever gotten interested in a new car at any point in time? Probably for most of you, it's a pickup truck of some kind. I don't know. But a new vehicle, you start thinking about it. You're like, am I looking to get in one of those? And then all of a sudden, you're like, what the fuck? They're everywhere. These cars are everywhere. What? It's like they're every other car down the road is this vehicle. But nobody, they didn't send out a mass forum and everybody's like, we're getting this vehicle. They were always there. You just didn't notice them until you started thinking about it. And then you're like, holy crap, they're everywhere. Unless you're like, hey, should I get a Lamborghini? You know, I haven't met the firefighter with the Lambo yet. Maybe that guy in LA, I can't remember his name, Isaac something. Anyways, the point is, when you believe those things, it's easier to notice them. If you believe I'm getting old and I'm falling apart, you notice every ache. If you believe I never have enough time, you'll constantly find evidence that you're overwhelmed. Does that mean that the underlying problem isn't real? No. But it does mean that your attention starts to filter reality through the story and through the lens that you're viewing the world. Each of us has a lens for the world. And each of us sees different things with that lens in the same situation. In the same situation, what do you take away from it? Where is your attention spent during that event? And self-leadership requires periodically asking, is this the whole truth, or is this simply the part of reality I've trained myself to notice? And that is an important question. Is this true objectively by itself? Or is this because my lens is set to a certain setting? What does my lens look like? How does that affect how I see things? And here's a crazy thing, it's we talk about like, hey, let's practice our wins. Let's share our wins. So do it, bring up stuff like that at the firehouse, and they're like, you soft ass, you foofy, you woo woo this, that, the other, Okay. Listen, I get it. Like, firefighters should be tough. You should be tough. I want you to be tough and strong and resilient, but those things are not the same as negative or cynical. And kindness is not a weakness, is not softness. It's courage. And this could be an important, strong fire service discussion because gratitude sometimes gets treated like motivational fluff. But what if we viewed gratitude as attention training? Does anything else sound like attention training? Any other habits that you have where it's like, learning how to focus my attention? Does anything come to mind? It's rhetorical, sort of. Should be obvious. Meditation. Okay, so what if we viewed gratitude as attention training? You're intentionally asking the mind to notice what it normally overlooks. Have you ever heard me say the reason that we do this is because, especially if you struggle to find what the positive is and what the good is and what the win is for the week, good. That's a sign. That's a signal. I need to work on this. It's not because it's not there. It's because you haven't been trained to recognize it. It's because your lens isn't dialed to those facts, to those perspectives. You're intentionally asking the mind to notice what it normally overlooks. And listen, you're still going to have problems. And your staffing is maybe going to be the same or get worse. Or you got 4 people off on injury and you can't fill their spots or even hire anybody because they're off on workers' comp and their spot is taken. And you're permanently down for 2 years. I get it. I've been there. The whole time I was in, we had 3 weeks of full staffing. We had 3 weeks before an injury, before a whatever, fill it in. Okay. I get it. I do. And you may still disagree with those around you, but you also have a crew that would come when you call. Maybe you have a family waiting at home. A body and a mind that is capable of doing difficult things that most people could never even dream of. Faced with situations that would crumble most. A career many people have and still do dream of having. A family meal around the station table. Another morning. Isn't that an interesting thing? Hey, I'm just grateful to have woken up this morning. When was the last time you thought that? But seriously, like I remember I brought this up recently, but a guy doing an interview asked somebody, hey, if I gave you $10 million right now, would you take it? And the guy was like, yeah, I would take it. He goes, great. But if I told you that I gave you $10 million, but you don't wake up to see tomorrow, would you still take it? He said, what? No. He goes, okay, wait, hold on. So if we think about this correctly, then your life, the life you have right now, waking up tomorrow, is more valuable to you than having $10 million. Your life is more valuable than $10 million. He goes, wow, I never thought of it that way. No, you didn't. If your life is more valuable than $10 million, how grateful are you to have something more valuable than that tomorrow morning when you wake up? How valuable is that? And see, the thing is, both realities can exist simultaneously. Gratitude doesn't erase difficulty. What it does is it prevents difficulty from becoming the only thing that you see. It doesn't make life easier. It's not the point. It prevents it from being the only thing that you see in the first place. Here's the thing. What would your mental diet look like if you just took in the last 24 hours? Which animal were you feeding? Resentment and fear, anger, gossip? Or was it gratitude and learning and discipline and presence? And if your physical diet looked like your mental diet yesterday, would you consider yourself healthy? If we're going to make this analogy. You know, one of the biggest takeaways here is you don't starve the wolf once. You don't starve it once. So wouldn't it be great if I could just like understand this concept and I do it for a day and then like I'm just different? Ah, that'd be great, right? That'd be amazing. For example, like you don't hear this talk today, think positively for 3 hours and then reach enlightenment, eternal bliss, right? I did it for 3 hours, right? I mean, that would almost be the same as like the people that are like, hey, I worked out 3 times in a week and then I went 4 weeks without it. Why am I not in shape? No, because it's a practice, right? It's daily, probably hourly, maybe every few minutes. Just like nutrition, you don't eat one healthy meal and declare yourself healthy. You like health is an outcome, right? I said this before. I get razzed on this when I was at the department. Be like, I would be the health guy. I was the health guy, right? I was on the peer fitness team and on the peer support team. And then I would have a donut. And it was the end of the world. And people would be like, oh, he's breaking. Oh my God, look at this guy. Is Mr. Health having a donut. That's not healthy. Health isn't an outcome. Or, I'm sorry, health isn't an action, it's an outcome. Right? Health is not one action. It is the sum total of all of your vices versus all of your positive habits and how it totals out at the end. Am I putting more into the bucket? Which bucket am I putting more into? That's going to determine the overall outcome. Okay. Which gratefully means you don't have to be perfect. You just have to have more in the other bucket. You repeatedly choose what you consume. Mental fitness works that way. There will be days when anger wins. There will be times when you complain. There will be moments when resentment gets fed. And that means you're a human being. Congratulations. Because guess what? Throughout this entire talk, you know what's still true is the goal wasn't perfection. Ah, shit, I fed the other wolf. I screwed up the whole thing. I had a bad moment. You ever acted like that with some of these habits? Or seen other people? We talk about the all or nothing approach in the fire service very often. The same is true here. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is awareness. Catch it sooner. Redirect your attention and then return. That's self-leadership. In the same way, have you noticed the analogy when we go through, and I would recommend go back through the meditation module if you've been through it. What are the instructions? When you find the mind, not if, when the mind wanders, bring it gently back to the breath. What do you think that's a practice in? That's a practice in self-awareness. That's a practice in the idea that my mind started wandering in the first place. I lost focus. Oh shit. How many times do you lose focus without even realizing it? All of a sudden, I'm down a 2.5 hour rabbit hole on Instagram about whatever, TikTok, all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, 2.5 hours. Maybe it's your off day. You're like, I had all these plans. I sat down to look at my phone. 2 hours went by. I didn't get anything done. Can I realize that I lost focus? Can I be more self-aware? That's self-leadership. And then ask, what are you feeding your crew? That's important. Because if we're leaders, then leadership isn't only about what you feed yourself, it's also about what you feed everyone around you. How are you helping them to feed themselves? When you walk into the kitchen, what do you bring with you? Energy, curiosity, humor, encouragement? Or are you the one that's constantly negative or gossiping or cynical or complaining? And if everyone at your station adopted your current attitude, what would the culture get better or worse? Be really honest about that. And if it stings a little bit, then that's useful. It's not it's not a character flaw. That's something that you can use if you have the lens for it. Because culture isn't something that an admin defines. Okay? They might do things that make it more difficult to have good culture. But do you know who drove the culture, at least at my fire department? It was those strong officers. It was those strong senior pipemen. The ones that were there every day, going on the calls, doing it with you, in the mud. Who defines the culture? Well, culture is created every time a firefighter interacts with one another. And what you feed becomes who you become. So eventually this becomes an identity conversation. Thoughts become repeated thoughts, and repeated thoughts become patterns, and patterns become behavior, and behavior becomes character, and character shapes your entire life. It goes back to an old, I think it's Chinese. Don't quote me on this. There's an old saying, right? An old quote. Watch your thoughts, for they become words. Watch your words, for they become actions. Watch your actions, for they become character. And watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. Character shapes your life. So something as small as where you constantly place your attention isn't actually small. That is the first domino. That is how you rebuild yourself every day. And the question is, what kind of person are your current inputs building? What kind of dominoes are you currently setting in place? The world will always give us the opportunity to have something negative to focus on, especially in like the social media AI age. Are you kidding me? At the tip of your fingers, especially in the fire service. There's always going to be another policy with somebody's name on it. There's always going to be more staffing problems. There's always going to be bad calls. There's always going to be the people that disappoint you and another reason to be angry. And you don't need to pretend that those things aren't real. But you do have to decide whether you're going to spend your time and your energy and your life feeding them. We all have a limited amount of attention. We all have a certain amount of mental bandwidth. Every moment you feed resentment is a moment you aren't feeding gratitude. Every hour you feed cynicism is an hour you aren't feeding growth. And every day you feed helplessness is a day you're not feeding ownership. There should be no helpless firefighters. Can we agree on that? So are we training helplessness or are we training ownership? If every day you feed helplessness is a day you're not feeding ownership, eventually the wolf you feed becomes the one that everyone else meets. So which one are you showing them? 3 questions for you. What have you been feeding lately? What has that been turning you into? And what deserves more of your attention starting today? The final thought. think self-leadership begins with understanding that you don't control every thought that enters your mind, but you do have a say in which thoughts you get attached to, which thoughts get fed. I said this last week or the week before, but you're not your thoughts. You're the thoughts that you put energy into. So be careful with what you repeatedly give your attention to. It eventually, slowly and subtly, becomes a part of who you are. And the hardship and the beauty of that statement and that realization is that you get to decide. It's awesome because you can change. And it's hard because you're responsible for who you are. Both can be true. Awesome. Thank you for joining me today, you guys. That's all I have for you.